If you've just joined us from BBC2, welcome to BBC4's Permanent Home. In just over an hour, we pay tribute to the legendary talent of Peggy Lee. And here's a taste of the rich mix of performance on offer from BBC4. Good evening and welcome to BBC4. We've just about recovered from our launch last night. Tonight we've the Welsh National Opera's Madame Butterfly, that's in an hour. And before that, in just a moment, the raw operatic talent of South Africa's townships is harnessed in a breathtaking production of Carmen. From the townships of South Africa to Cardiff, and a classic production of Madame Butterfly, specially filmed for BBC4, performed by the Welsh National Opera and introduced by Charles Hazelwood. Last night, Robert Hughes presented an absorbing portrait of Spanish artist Francisco de Goya. Now his story gets the cinematic treatment in this epic biography, set at the end of his life when an exile in France. In Spanish with English subtitles and, as you'd expect, containing some violent scenes, BBC4 presents Goya in Bordeaux. BBC4 is home to a rich mix of performance. Here's a preview of what's to come. Ambition and intrigue now on BBC4. From Watergate to Resignation, we begin the first of a two-part profile of the secret life of Richard Nixon. World cinema, Hollywood blockbusters and the classics are all coming out on DVD. Stuart Maconie casts a critical eye over the latest releases now on BBC4, half an hour later than billed, in the DVD collection. Now, half an hour later than billed, due to the extension of our first live performance earlier tonight, BBC4 continues to tell the outrageous, definitive history of Britain's own modern art revolution. There are some strobe lighting effects and strong language, as you might expect, in part 2 of Brit Art. And you don't have to wait until next weekend. We begin our celebration of the Walton Centenary now on BBC4, as Birmingham Royal Ballet perform two settings of his music from the company's recently refurbished home, where Deborah Bull is waiting for us. The French Revolution triggered a wave of fear and terror that got the British building fortresses and castles like they never had before. Now on BBC4, Dan Cruikshank recreates the horror of an invasion by the French. And the moving story of female-to-male transsexual Robert Eads is this Thursday's Storyville at 9 o'clock. This is BBC4, now the talk show with the journalist and art critic Voldemar Januszczak. It all gets surreal from now on here on BBC4. Jonathan Meades traces the development of surrealism in an hour, followed by Dali's disturbing classic film, Un Chien Andalou. And Dali's success gets him into hot water first. There's very strong language and strobe effects as Stephen Fry, Ewan Bremner and an impish cast present Surrealissimo. It's all still a bit strange here on BBC4, and there's more strong language as Jonathan Meades gets inside the world of Dali, Breton and co. to chart the development of the Surrealist. An invasion by Germany and the pernicious ideology of Adolf Hitler threatened our very existence, and the English Channel was no longer protection to the threat from above. This is BBC4. And this is BBC4, now the talk show with Maria Misra. And Storyville, following Robert Eads' moving story, is tomorrow at 9. In half an hour, actors from theatre, film and television discuss the challenge of playing Hamlet. First on BBC4, following his highly acclaimed production, Peter Brook discusses the inspiration for his work in conversation with Sir Richard Eyre. With scientists already undertaking the first cloning experiments, can we trust them with the responsibility of looking after our interests? Now, BBC4, with the Royal Society and Radio 4's Today programme, hosts a unique debate on the wide-ranging issues surrounding genetic experimentation. It's presented by John Humphreys. As well as acclaimed and thought-provoking theatre, BBC4 screens the best of recent international cinema. Here's a preview. Good evening, welcome to BBC4. Later tonight we've the first of our Readers and Writers roadshows, bringing authors face to face with the people who buy their books. That's at 8:30. First tonight, Julian Richards uncovers the blood of the Vikings. And this is BBC4 with the very first Readers and Writers roadshow, presented by Kate Moss. We've a time... BBC4's Readers and Writers Roadshow is the first ever weekly book programme to be broadcast throughout the year. It's reached Colchester now, where Kate Moss and guests explore the different perspectives that literature takes on history. Now on BBC4, Helena Kennedy encounters some very distressing scenes as she journeys to Rwanda to profile the work and life of a secretive and controversial world figure. And tonight we've Edward Yang's epic award-winning drama A One and a Two. That's in half an hour. First on BBC4, a review of the best new and classic DVD releases with Stuart McConey. Paintbrushes and chainsaws at the ready now as BBC4, with some strobe effects, reveals the candid, bitchy and highly entertaining unofficial history of Brit art, in the words of the people who made it happen.
What it takes to keep a huge media empire very much a family affair. Now on BBC4, an inside look at the Murdoch dynasty. Hello, tonight on BBC4, Wind in the Willows meets Swallows and Amazons for a big read Battle of the Books at 8:30. Then we mark 50 years since the death of British contralto Kathleen Ferrier in a moving portrait which reveals the woman behind the amazing voice. That's at 9. And don't miss Alan Davis and Joe Brand on angels, Alsatians and goodness knows what else in brand new QI, presided over by the lovely and fragrant Stephen Fry. That's at 10:30. How an art historian found playing the undercover game almost impossible when confronted with a long-lost Rubens. Art crime in 10 minutes on BBC4 after the business confessions of Mr. Clockwork Radio, Trevor Bayliss. Very small Rubens paintings were stolen from Spain in 1985 and found their way to Sweden and Miami. Art crime next on BBC4. Small is beautiful, first on BBC4, and very elusive indeed. Art Crime tells the story of an art historian enlisted to help with an elaborate undercover sting who got completely overwhelmed by a very tiny Rubens. Now on BBC4, the history of one of the most unlikely scientific pioneers of our age, the laboratory map.
Whilst members of the Athens Olympic Committee and senior politicians dodge journalists asking difficult questions, the architects, engineers, choreographers, musicians, lighting gurus and television producers all struggle on with their preparations. But will they meet the deadline now on BBC4 for the Games in Athens?
Hello, after tonight's prom on BBC4, should England have its own national anthem and should it be Jerusalem? The enduring appeal of one of our favourite hymns at 9:10. And for Thursday night comedy, not only is there brand new Arrested Development at 11:30, but also another chance to see Chris Langham as hapless documentary maker Roy Mallard. People Like Us begins at 11. The Vienna Philharmonic performs Bruckner's Symphony No. 8 in C minor. That's tonight's prom in half an hour. You're watching BBC4.
Stirring stuff now on BBC4 with strong language and some nudity. An anthem for England.
And this is BBC4. Thursday night comedy with Chris Langham in People Like Us in half an hour on BBC4 after QI. Now on BBC4, another chance to see Chris Langham as Roy Mallard, merely an observer of People Like Us. Hello, after last night's announcement of the Booker Prize shortlist for 2005, tonight here on BBC4, Kirsty Walk examines the 6 books and authors in contention at 10. Then an exclusive insight into the daunting job of being a Booker Prize judge. 5 members of the public were given just 3 weeks to read last year's long list. Book It Out is at 1. And don't miss the final part of the second High Mat at 10:30. This is BBC4 with the last prom before the last night in half an hour. This is BBC4 on the last night before the last night with Verity Sharp. This is BBC4 taking a good look at the Booker Prize shortlist for 2005. Here's Kirsty Walk. Where and with whom will Herman end up? The final part with some sexual scenes now on BBC4 of the second High Mat.